Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Devotions. Pastor Steve here walking with you in God's Word. We're in Genesis chapter 38. And I think I begin every video in these last weeks of being able to say, here comes that narrative unfolding. And as we've kind of walked with Jacob's family, Israel and his sons, we just can continue to get a little bit of detail, even more detail in Genesis chapter 38. His brothers have sold Joseph off to Egypt, as we talked about in last video, in last chapter of 37. And as that's happening, there's also life happening with the brothers as well. And we get this detailed look at Judah. Judah is the fourth born of Leah to Jacob, and so fourth born son. And just so that we can track Judah real quickly, other three brothers ahead of him really aren't going to be receiving the blessing from their father because of their sin. Yet Judah is going to be the one that has the blessing, is going to be the line. Through Judah, we're going to be able to actually see the Messiah. And the reason why I put that forth to you in chapter 38 is you just wouldn't design it that way. Because as we read Genesis 38, you're saying, this is too controversial. This is too messed up. You would have a cleaner and better picture if it is something of a blessing and a promise, especially from God. Yet, as we've banked upon these last videos and stuff, despite the reality of humanity and the chaos and the sin of humanity, God's narrative continues to unfold. And it just so happens that as we get the detail of Judah and his life and his future and what has taken place within his family, it doesn't discount the narrative of God unfolding through Judah and the blessing of God in Judah for Christ. Genesis chapter 38, a detailed view of Judah's family. So we know Joseph's out in Egypt, but they take a little break of keeping our eyes fixed on Joseph. We'll get there in chapter 39, but chapter 38 is all about Judah's family, bring him forth into this detail. So at that time, verse 1 in chapter 38, at that time Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hirah. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. So first and foremost, right, we were talking about what about intermarrying? What about taking women from other nations? Not really the design of God. And so just kind of starts us off right up front here. And so he married her and lay with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, lie with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to produce offspring for your brother. In that context, that's exactly what they would walk forward in, and being able to say the treasure of the family is the offspring, right? Especially sons and men coming from the family. And so they would actually have the woman, the wife into the family, and if her husband passed away, it was the responsibility of the family to be able to care for that wife, the responsibility of the family to be able to say if there wasn't any sons or offsprings to bring about that. And so this isn't something strange out of the context. This is how their familial system truly worked in that context. So verse 9 says, but Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, right? While he would perhaps have a son, it would actually be for his brother's and he would be kind of pushed aside. So whenever he lay with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from producing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight. So he put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he thought he may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah, to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira, the Adulamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enam, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that, though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face, not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law. He went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord, and the staff in your hand," she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend to the Adulamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman. But he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where's the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enam?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said, there hasn't been any shrine prostitute there." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughing stock. I mean, after all, I did send her this young goat, but he didn't find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law, Tamar, is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said. And she added, "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, "This is the one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out. And she said, "So, this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez, which means broken out. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was given the name Zerah. Why the detail? Why the narrative? Again, the brokenness of humanity, the reality of the chaos of sin in humanity, goes forth into how humanity is brought forth, being able to actually know that besides that chaos and sin of humanity, God's story, God's narrative continues to unfold. We get to see, and just jumping really far into the future, Judah is that one who is going to be blessed and be able to actually have the Christ, the Messiah, come through his lineage. It's going to come through Perez, and Perez being that firstborn. And so as we get to see this, it is not how we would see God designing. Yet in the midst of the waywardness and the wandering of his people, God continues to intervene. God continues to step forward. And so as we get to see this in Judah's family, as we see this in Jacob's family, as we're going to see this in Joseph's family, as we're going to see this throughout our families, the wandering and the waywardness of our decisions and our actions, but the faithfulness and the promises and the consistent faithfulness of our God continues to speak and continues to lay over the ways of humanity. We thank God that he sees fit to be able to love his creation, even in the wanderings and even in the waywardness. And while there is justice and while there is consequences, as we get to see, death in the family of Judah, there is also the reality of continual connection of God to his people. Nothing separates us. And I said that last video, but it just continues to come forward. Nothing separates us from the love of God. You might think that your sin and your circumstances are distancing you from God, and that can very well be, and we've always asked this before. I feel far from God. Well, who moved? God is consistently placing and just firm and foundational and faithful to remain where he is, calling us, inviting us out of our sin and the chaos and the reality of our humanness to just follow him, walk with him in his promises and his blessings and in his righteousness. And he does that continually, day after day. His grace, his mercies are new this day for you through generations ago, even up to this present day. God is with us. To that we can say, thanks be to God. Have a blessed day.